The chill of the wooden floor against my cheek was the first thing I registered, followed by the faint scent of lemon polish and old dust. I was under my father's kitchen table, knees drawn to my chest, every muscle tense. Above me, two men were talking, their voices a low murmur that occasionally sharpened into distinct words. One was my father, Elias Thorne, a man whose hands had built half the furniture in this house and whose integrity was as solid as the oak he worked with. The other was my husband, Marcus, a man I had loved, trusted, and built a life with for 12 years. And yet, here I was, hidden, listening to him calmly discuss taking everything my father owned. It had started an hour earlier, an unannounced visit to my father's house. A persistent whisper of unease I'd been ignoring for months finally pushed me out the door. My father, usually a man of quiet, predictable routines, had met me at the door with a flicker of fear, quickly masked by a steely resolve. Before I could even speak, he'd gripped my arm, pulled me inside, and in a low, urgent whisper, told me to get under the kitchen table and not make a sound. The sheer force of his command, the raw emotion in his eyes, compelled me. I simply obeyed, crawling into the cramped space, my heart thrumming a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The air was thick with the scent of his pipe tobacco and the faint, sweet smell of the apple pie he'd been baking, a comforting aroma that now felt utterly incongruous with the terror gripping me. From my hiding spot, I could see the scuffed toes of my father's work boots, and, beside them, the polished gleam of Marcus's expensive leather loafers. They were sitting directly above me, the heavy walnut table a thin barrier between my terror and their casual conversation. I heard the clink of ceramic mugs, the hiss of the coffee maker. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee, usually a welcome scent, now felt like a prelude to something dark and unsettling. Then, Marcus's voice, smooth and practiced, began to speak about my father's house. "Elias," he'd begun, his tone almost solicitous, a practiced warmth that I now recognized as a performance. "You're not getting any younger. This place, it's a lot to manage, isn't it? All those bedrooms, the yard, and with property values in Willow Creek the way they are, it's quite an asset." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, a subtle pressure building. I could almost feel his gaze sweeping over the familiar, worn details of the kitchen, assessing its worth. My father's response was a non-committal grunt, a sound I knew well, a signal that he was listening, but not yet engaged. It was a sound that, in retrospect, was part of his own carefully constructed act. "I've been thinking," Marcus continued, oblivious or uncaring of the silence, his voice maintaining that smooth, persuasive cadence. "What if we, Leona and I, took it off your hands? For estate planning, you know. Make things cleaner down the line, avoid probate, keep it in the family." He emphasized "keep it in the family" with a slight dip in his voice, as if it were a benevolent gesture, a selfless act of love and foresight. The words hit me like a physical blow. Keep it in the family. My father's house, the house he'd built with his own hands, brick by painstaking brick, over 30 years. The house where I'd grown up, where my mother had planted the rose bushes that still bloomed every summer, their delicate fragrance sometimes drifting through the open kitchen window. It wasn't just a house. It was the physical manifestation of my father's life, his sweat, his sacrifice. It held the echoes of my childhood laughter, the scent of my mother's baking, the quiet comfort of family gatherings. And Marcus, my husband, was suggesting he simply sign it over. The audacity, the sheer cold-blooded calculation of it, made my stomach churn. I pressed my hands over my mouth, stifling a gasp. The air under the table felt thick and suffocating, laced with the smell of floor polish and a sudden, overwhelming nausea. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. This wasn't a casual suggestion, it was a calculated move. I had seen Marcus's charm in action for years, watched him effortlessly persuade clients at the real estate firm where he worked, closing deals with a smile and a handshake. But this was different. This was my father. This was us. This was a betrayal that cut to the very core of my being, unraveling 12 years of shared history in a single, horrifying moment. The warmth I had always associated with Marcus, The feeling of security evaporated, leaving behind a chilling void. To understand the full weight of that moment, you need to know about this house. My father, Elias, bought it in 1985, a young man with a new wife and a dream. He worked 2 jobs, a carpenter by day, a handyman by night, pouring every spare dollar, every ounce of energy, into this 3-bedroom home. I remember him coming home, smelling of sawdust and sweat, his hands calloused but always gentle. He paid off the mortgage early, a feat of financial discipline that had always filled me with admiration. I remember the day he burned the mortgage papers in the fireplace, a quiet ceremony of triumph. On my 30th birthday, he'd handed me the worn, soft deed, the paper almost translucent from being folded and unfolded so many times. "This is yours someday, Leona," he'd said, his eyes crinkling at the corners, a rare, tender smile on his lips. Always a place to come home. It wasn't just a promise. It was a sacred trust, a symbol of his enduring love and provision. And now, Marcus, with his smooth words and polished shoes, was trying to take it. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. He, who had always seemed so supportive of my bond with my father, who had often praised Elias's work ethic and generosity, was now attempting to strip him of his most cherished possession. The conversation above me continued, a slow, insidious dance. Marcus outlined the benefits, the ease, the peace of mind my father would have. He spoke of tax advantages, of simplifying the estate, of avoiding the complexities of probate. His voice was a soothing balm, designed to lull and persuade. My father, for his part, played along, his voice a little shaky, a little confused, exactly as Marcus would expect from an aging man. He asked questions about the paperwork, feigned forgetfulness about previous discussions, bought time. He even let out a soft, almost imperceptible sigh, a sound of weary resignation that would have fooled anyone. I realized then that my father hadn't just hidden me. He was performing. He was setting a trap. A cold shiver ran down my spine, a mix of fear for my father and a dawning respect for his quiet cunning. But for what? And why me? Why had he insisted I hide, rather than confronting Marcus directly? The questions swirled in my mind, adding to the suffocating pressure under the table. The answer came as Marcus, growing impatient with my father's feigned senility, leaned forward. I could hear the subtle shift in his weight, the rustle of his expensive suit jacket, the faint scent of his cologne, usually so comforting, now acrid and unsettling. "Look, Elias," he said, his voice losing its veneer of patience, a sharp edge creeping in. "We both know this is the best option. It's just paperwork, a simple signature, and everything's settled. No need to involve lawyers, no mess down the line." The implication was clear. Lawyers would only complicate things, make them more expensive, and perhaps expose his true intentions. Then I heard it. A small, almost imperceptible click. It came from the old radio on the kitchen counter, the one my father had owned since before I was born. It usually sat silent, a relic of a bygone era, its wooden casing faded and scratched. But now, a tiny red light, barely visible from my angle, glowed steadily. A recording. My father was recording him. The pieces of the puzzle began to snap into place with a horrifying clarity. My mind raced, piecing together fragments I'd dismissed as insignificant. The casual questions Marcus had asked about my father's finances, his health, his will, the way he'd subtly steered conversations towards the value of the property, the burden of maintenance, the rising cost of property taxes. I'd always attributed it to his professional interest, his background in real estate, a natural curiosity about family assets. Now, it twisted into something sinister, a carefully woven web of manipulation. He wasn't just interested, he was calculating, planning, strategizing. Then, Marcus stood up. The polished leather shoes moved away from my sightline. "I'll just grab us another coffee," he said, his voice regaining its easy charm, a mask slipping back into place. My father, with a perfectly timed cough, excused himself to the living room to adjust the volume on the television, a show he never watched. It was all orchestrated, a silent, deadly ballet. From my vantage point, I watched Marcus's hand dip into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small amber pill bottle, the kind pharmacies use, its label obscured by his fingers. With practiced ease, he unscrewed the cap, tilted the bottle, and 2 small white pills tumbled into his palm. He glanced over his shoulder, a quick, furtive movement, confirming my father was out of sight, then dropped them into one of the coffee cups on the counter. My father's cup, the one with the chipped rim that I'd always teased him about. No hesitation, no second thought. Just 2 pills disappearing into the dark liquid, dissolving almost instantly. He recapped the bottle, slipped it back into his pocket, and picked up his own cup, taking a casual sip, his eyes scanning the room as if admiring the decor. Zolpidem. I would learn later. A powerful sedative. 2 pills, enough to render a man my father's age unconscious in under 20 minutes. Enough time to press his hand onto transfer documents, to take photos of his signature, to do whatever needed to be done while my father slept through it, waking with no memory and no recourse. The thought sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through me, a cold, sickening wave. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just about the house. This was a premeditated act of elder abuse, a betrayal so profound it shattered my entire world. The man I had married, the man who swore to love and protect me, was attempting to drug my father, to steal his home, to strip him of his dignity, to erase his very identity. The charming smile, the gentle touch, the shared laughter, all of it was a lie, a carefully constructed illusion. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burst out from under that table, to confront him, to tear his carefully constructed facade to shreds, to scratch that smug smirk off his face. But my father's earlier command echoed in my ears. Don't make a sound. The urgency in his voice, the fear in his eyes, held me captive. I stayed hidden, my body trembling uncontrollably, tears silently streaming down my face, tracing cold paths down my cheeks. I was witnessing the true face of the man I had married, a face I had never known, a monster lurking beneath the surface. The air under the table felt heavy, suffocating, each breath a struggle. The next few minutes were a blur of agonizing tension. My father returned, his footsteps slow and deliberate, a slight tremor in his hand as he reached for his doctored coffee. Marcus watched him, a subtle smirk playing on his lips, a predatory gleam in his eyes. My father picked up the cup. My breath hitched. He brought it to his lips. He took a sip. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst through my chest. He took another. I thought I would be sick, the nausea rising in my throat. Every second stretched into an eternity, a slow-motion nightmare unfolding before my eyes. Then, my father, with a quiet cough, set the cup down. He placed it carefully on a coaster, as if savoring the moment. "You know, Marcus," he said, his voice surprisingly clear, devoid of any confusion or shakiness. "I've been thinking about what you said, about making things easier." Marcus's eyes gleamed, a triumphant flicker. He leaned back in his chair, a smug satisfaction spreading across his features. "Good, Elias. I knew you'd see sense. It's a practical decision, really." "Yes," my father continued, his gaze steady, unwavering. "I have. And I've decided that the easiest thing for everyone, the cleanest thing, is to keep things exactly as they are." He paused, letting the words sink in, then looked directly at Marcus, his gaze unwavering, piercing through the younger man's false bravado. "This house is my legacy. It's not for sale, and it's certainly not for transfer. Not to you, not to anyone." The words hung in the air, sharp and definitive, cutting through the carefully constructed illusion. Marcus's smile faltered, then vanished completely. The color drained from his face, replaced by a pale, sickly hue. The air in the kitchen grew heavy, thick with unspoken tension, a palpable shift in the atmosphere. "Elias," he began, his voice losing its warmth, a hint of steel replacing the earlier solicitous tone. "I think you're misunderstanding. This isn't about selling. It's about securing your future, our future." He tried to regain control, to reassert his narrative, but the confidence had left his voice. "My future is secure," my father stated, his voice now firm, devoid of any feigned confusion. his eyes burning with a quiet intensity. "And as for our future, Marcus, I think we have very different ideas of what that entails." He pushed his chair back slightly, a subtle movement that signaled the end of the charade. Suddenly, my father reached under the table, his hand finding mine. His touch was firm, reassuring, a silent promise of protection. He squeezed it once, a signal. It was time. My heart leaped, a surge of adrenaline mixed with a strange, fierce resolve. I crawled out from under the table, slowly, deliberately, my muscles stiff from the cramped position, my eyes fixed on Marcus's face. The shock, the disbelief, the dawning horror that spread across his features was a sight I will never forget. His mouth opened, then closed, no words coming out, a fish out of water. He looked from me to my father, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him, piece by agonizing piece. The color that had drained from his face now returned in an angry flush. "Leona?" he finally managed, his voice a strangled whisper, barely audible. What are you doing here?" He sounded genuinely bewildered, as if I had materialized out of thin air. "I'm here, Marcus," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, though my knees were trembling, "because my father asked me to be, and because I needed to hear the truth." My gaze held his, unwavering, letting him see the depth of my betrayal, the raw pain in my eyes. My father then reached for the old radio, his hand moving with a deliberate slowness. He pressed a button. The tiny red light blinked off. "And I needed you to hear it too, Marcus," he said, his voice resonating with a quiet authority, a deep, unwavering strength. "Every word of it." He gestured to the coffee cup, still sitting on the coaster, the dark liquid undisturbed. "And I needed you to know, I didn't drink your coffee." Marcus's face went ashen, a ghastly white. He knew. He knew about the recording. He knew I had heard everything. The pills, the plan, the betrayal. The carefully constructed mask he had worn for years shattered completely, revealing the calculating, ruthless man beneath. He stumbled backward, knocking his chair slightly, his eyes wide with a desperate, cornered animal fear. He looked around the kitchen, as if searching for an escape, a way to rewind the last hour, to erase the damning evidence. The confrontation that followed was a blur of accusations, denials, and raw, painful truths. Marcus tried to bluff, to deny, to twist the narrative, to paint my father as a confused old man and me as a hysterical wife. He even tried to suggest I was in on some elaborate scheme with my father to frame him. His voice grew louder, more desperate, his words laced with venom. But my father had meticulously documented everything. Not just the recording of their conversation, but months of Marcus's subtle manipulations, his attempts to isolate my father, to gain control of his finances, to subtly undermine his confidence. My father, the quiet carpenter, had been watching, waiting, and planning, his patience a formidable weapon. He had kept a detailed journal, noting dates, times, and specific instances of Marcus's probing questions and veiled suggestions. He had even installed a small, discreet camera in the kitchen, capturing Marcus's actions with the pill bottle. It turned out my father had suspected Marcus for months. Little things, inconsistencies, questions Marcus asked that didn't quite add up. He'd seen the way Marcus looked at the house, not with affection, but with a calculating glint in his eye, as if appraising a commodity. He'd noticed Marcus's increasing interest in his financial statements, his subtle attempts to get him to sign over power of attorney. He'd even consulted a lawyer, a family friend named Sarah Jenkins, who advised him to document everything, to set a trap, to gather irrefutable evidence. And I, his own daughter, had been completely blind, caught in the web of my husband's charm and my own desperate desire to believe in the man I loved. The realization of my own naivety was a bitter pill to swallow, almost as bitter as the one Marcus had intended for my father. That night, Marcus was removed from the house, not by me, but by the police my father had called, discreetly before I even arrived. They had been waiting in a nearby patrol car, ready to act on my father's signal. The evidence was overwhelming. The recording, the pill bottle found in his pocket, the lawyer's testimony about my father's concerns, the video footage from the hidden camera. It was a humiliating, devastating end to a 12-year marriage, played out under the harsh glare of police flashlights, and the quiet, watchful eyes of my father. I stood there, numb, watching the man I had married being led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. The aftermath was a long, painful journey of disentanglement. The divorce was messy, protracted, and emotionally draining. Marcus fought dirty, attempting to discredit me, to portray my father as senile, to deny everything, to twist the narrative into a tale of an elderly man's delusion and a vengeful wife. He even tried to claim I was complicit, that I knew about his plans and was merely feigning ignorance. But the truth, recorded and documented, was undeniable. He lost his job at the prestigious real estate firm, his reputation in the community was shattered, and eventually, he lost his freedom. The charges of elder abuse, attempted fraud, and administering a controlled substance were severe, and the evidence, thanks to my father's foresight and meticulous planning, was irrefutable. He was sentenced to a significant prison term, a consequence he had so carelessly brought upon himself. The hardest part was confronting my own naivety. How could I have been so blind? How could I have shared my life, my bed, my dreams with a man capable of such cold-hearted deceit? The man I thought I knew, the charming, attentive husband, the supportive partner, was a carefully constructed facade, a predator hiding in plain sight, his true nature masked by a veneer of respectability. The realization left a gaping wound in my soul, a profound sense of personal failure. I questioned every memory, every shared moment, every whispered endearment. Was it all a lie? Was I just a means to an end for him? My father, in his quiet wisdom, helped me heal. He never once said, "I told you so," though he had every right to. Instead, he listened patiently as I poured out my confusion and pain. He offered comfort in his steady presence, and he reminded me that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we truly don't know. He taught me that trust must be earned, not blindly given, and that instincts, even when inconvenient or uncomfortable, should never be ignored. He helped me understand that my blindness was not a flaw in my character, but a testament to my capacity for love and trust, qualities that Marcus had cruelly exploited. Slowly, painstakingly, I rebuilt my life. The idea of returning to my old accounting job felt hollow, meaningless. I went back to school, not for accounting, but for law, specializing in elder protection. I wanted to be the advocate my father had needed, to help others who might fall victim to similar betrayals, to give a voice to those who might not have the strength or foresight to protect themselves. It became my new purpose, a way to channel my pain into something meaningful. I sold the house Marcus and I had shared, purging it of his presence, of the memories that now felt tainted. It was a cathartic act, a symbolic severing of ties. With the proceeds, I bought a small cottage near my father's home, a cozy, sun-drenched place with a small garden. It was a fresh start, a place where I could feel safe, where I could trust again, where the air felt clean and unburdened. The Ford Explorer that Marcus had bought with money he'd siphoned from my savings account, the one he'd let get repossessed when the legal battles began, showed up at auction a few months ago. I bought it back. Not because I needed a car, but because I could. It felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, a tangible symbol of my recovery, closing a circle that needed to be closed. Driving it felt different now, not a reminder of him, but a testament to my own resilience. My father, Elias, is doing well. He still lives in his house, the one he almost lost, now wrapped in legal protections that make it impossible for anyone to manipulate or coerce him. He still works in his workshop, the scent of sawdust a comforting presence. He still putters in his garden, tending to my mother's rose bushes, their blooms a vibrant splash of color against the weathered wood of the house. And he still sips coffee from a new, unchipped mug at the walnut table where I learned the most painful, yet ultimately liberating, truth of my life. We often sit there together, sharing quiet moments, the unspoken understanding between us deeper than any words. The greatest irony of all this, the part that would be funny if it weren't so perfectly, impossibly appropriate, is that Marcus spent 12 years trying to take everything from me. He took my money, I got it back, plus his half in the divorce settlement. He took my sense of safety. I built it back stronger, with better locks, legal protections, and a network of people who actually know how to help. He tried to take my father's house. It's more secure now than it ever was before, a fortress of love and legacy. He tried to take my belief in my own judgment. Instead, he gave me proof that my judgment was right all along, that the instinct I ignored for years, the one that said something is wrong here, something doesn't add up, was accurate from the beginning. Every single thing he tried to take, he failed, except one. In the end, the only thing he succeeded in taking was himself out of my life, and that, as it turns out, was the greatest gift he ever gave me. It was the gift of freedom, of self-discovery, of a life unburdened by deceit. I park in the driveway of my new cottage. The porch light is on, a warm, inviting glow, casting long shadows across the neatly trimmed lawn. Inside, there's a quiet peace, a sense of security I hadn't known existed, a feeling of being truly home. I make a cup of herbal tea, not coffee, the fragrant steam rising gently, and sit by the window, looking out at the familiar street. The streetlights guide me through intersections I know by heart now. Left on Willow Creek Lane, right at the old oak tree. Home, my new life, built on solid ground, not on shifting sands of lies. The walnut table taught me something my father knew all along. Certainty is worth more than comfort. Proof is worth more than promises. And sometimes, the best gift someone can give you is the motivation to save yourself. It taught me that true strength isn't about avoiding pain, but about facing it, learning from it, and emerging stronger. To you listening to my story, remember this. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones hiding the deepest secrets. Looking back, I realize I ignored so many red flags because I wanted to believe in the life I thought we were building. I convinced myself that love meant trusting blindly, that questioning meant failing, that suspicion was a sign of weakness. Don't make my mistake. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, even if it's inconvenient, even if it shatters your comfortable illusions. Betrayal doesn't always announce itself with a fanfare. It hides in plain sight, wearing the mask of someone you love, whispering sweet nothings while plotting your downfall. What I learned is that protecting yourself isn't giving up on people. It means documenting what you see, asking questions when things don't add up, and having the courage to face uncomfortable truths. This wasn't about revenge. It was about survival, about reclaiming my life and my father's dignity. When you face betrayal, you don't have to choose between love and self-protection. I believe God gave me that table for a reason, to hear the truth and find the strength to act on it. The lesson isn't that people will hurt you, it's that you're stronger than their lies, and that your own resilience is your most powerful weapon. This story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.